forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Deace.
Greetings. Welcome to another episode and another week of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Deace, and we begin right away with running down the Big Five here on Bigger Ten with my co-host Aaron McIntire, who's got the Big Five we're going to be talking about. Aaron.
Yep, Big Five. We'll start out with Mark Dantonio, the Dean of Dumb. You see what I did there? You like that? There's a
little play on the Dean of Discipline as he was once anointed by the Big Ten Network.
The Dean of Big Ten Discipline. There's a new story out from the Detroit News regarding Dantonio. Now, Steve, you're much more aware of this story. You've been following this story very closely, but the gist of this story is that a few weeks ago, Dantonio, I believe, said in this ongoing situation with Curtis Blackwell, where Blackwell, former assistant coach for Michigan State, is suing Dantonio along with the university for wrongful termination. Dantonio said that Blackwell never came along on recruiting visits. Along with him, because per NCAA guidelines, only certain people are actually able to go on recruiting visits. Blackwell was not one of those people. Well, lo and behold, in that trial, there comes out a picture from Blackwell's team of who? Mark Dantonio, along with Curtis Blackwell, in the home of a recruit, and that's pretty interesting. It means that, Dantonio did this little thing called perjure himself. Is that bad?
It can be. It can be very bad. And Aaron, if you look at the timetable of the chain of events here and you start doing the math. So a lot of people thought Mark Dantonio was going to step aside after last season and that it was pretty clear the program had run its course. And he's had a tremendous win-loss record there. He's the winningest coach in school history. But I go back to a note. I think we even got this last week on the show. Was I think our question of the week, wasn't it?
I was going to go there next.
Yeah, it says, hey, do you guys think we should maybe wait, until we know the full breadth of what went on with Dantonio before we start talking about whether he's a Hall of Fame coach? Well, let's connect the dots. So he has a disappointing season. A lot of people think he should step aside. He chooses not to. Says he's going to come back for next year. He's got this long ballyhooed longevity bonus staring him in the face. What was it, $4 million on January the 15th, right? Mm-hmm. Well, on January the 10th, 5 days before he's due to collect that check, he testifies under oath in a civil deposition, as you mentioned, in the Curtis Blackwell affair. And he specifically denies that Curtis Blackwell ever went into homes with him on recruiting visits. He says that Blackwell would accompany him in the vehicle, but stayed outside so that they wouldn't violate NCAA rules. He says this under oath, and then 5 days later, collects his check, and all of a sudden now we find out that, well, he lied. Now, why are those dates important? Well, because Mark Dantonio was an embattled coach. And a lot of his own fans thought it was time to give him the George Costanza tap and have him move on, right? If he admits under oath on January 10th that he has committed NCAA violations, can you guess what he probably doesn't get, Aaron, on January 15th?
Probably not that bonus because he's going to be fired with cause.
Yes, yeah. Or at least it's a risk, but no question about it. It's not a sure thing. $4 million is not the sure thing it was, and that's his golden parachute. That's his retirement. That's essentially his walking away money if he had quit. And now they can fire him with cause, with him admitting to NCAA violations. So you lie there. not knowing apparently that Curtis Blackwell and his attorneys already have the photo of you in Dalen Hayes' home. That's the mega recruit from a few years, what was this, 4 or 5 years ago. And his mom even signing a sworn affidavit that, yeah, we had you all over and it was a great time.
And can I interject this here real quick? My favorite part of this story from the Detroit News, lawyers for Dantonio also said, quote, while Dantonio does not recall Blackwell being at the location depicted in the pictures or how Blackwell came to appear in the photograph, he is adamant that he did not drive Blackwell there or authorize Blackwell to be there. There's raining, there's peeing, and then there's peeing on me and telling me it's raining.
Right.
I mean, come on, man.
He just magically appeared. I didn't know what happened.
How did he get in that photo?
I just turned around
Harry
and I'm
Potter?
like, where'd you come from? Right? Keep in mind that Mark Dantonio was fined last year or back in 2018, so 2 seasons ago, by the Big Ten for his role in what went on at the Michigan State game between his team and Devin Bush. And you'll remember this, the mass confrontation where they were on the field during Michigan's assigned warm-up time. And he leads the team out there, for their Sparty walk where they go out there arm in arm. And he does it on purpose when Michigan is supposed to have its warm-up time on the field all alone. And they walk right through Devin Bush. And there's that, that altercation and Devin Bush starts kicking out the Sparty logo. You remember that a couple of years ago, right?
Yep.
Well, Dantonio lied. He got caught lying, saying he wasn't there. He didn't know anything about it until the cameras actually caught him standing behind his team the whole time, smiling while it was going on. So I think it's time to start asking some questions, because until this revelation, it looked like Curtis Blackwell's case 72 hours ago looked like he could be in trouble. They went out and hired, we talked about this last week, Tom Mars, the now NCAA enforcement officer, who's, the NCAA got so tired of losing to this guy in court, they hired him away. Well, he hired Tom Mars to join his legal team. Mars got a look at, I think, at one of the lawyers on Blackwell's team and said, I don't want to be aligned with this guy, and bolted after just a week. And Blackwell was facing a threshold before the judge there in Michigan that this suit had merit and was worthy of going forward. And so you go back to January 10th when they asked Mark Dantonio those questions. Clearly they knew they had this information. They were setting him up. That's pretty obvious. And then they waited to see if he was going to take the bait. And then when it was their time to show that their case had merit, because this is largely Blackwell's word against Mark Dantonio so far, right? Well, that means the credibility of each side is inherent to the strength of their case. And at the 11th hour here, facing this deadline from the judge, the Blackwell legal team came out with this affidavit from Dalen Hayes' mom, as well as this photo, which severely calls Mark Dantonio's credibility into question, and obviously calls into question that he committed perjury under oath. I mean, there's videotape that you can go find. You can find videotape of Mark Dantonio answering these questions and saying he never took Curtis Blackwell with him into the home in violation of NCAA rules. Now, that's not the only NCAA allegation that Blackwell has levied against Michigan State and Dantonio, as well as lining up jobs for recruits and things of that nature. But this begs a bigger question. If you're lying about this and under oath, what else did you lie about? I mean, you're dealing with a program here that brought a sexual predator named Austin Robertson. He's going to testify in writing in this trial later on, by the way. And you brought him on campus over the objections of other assistant coaches who thought he was too much of a danger. You brought him in. He actually ends up being a sexual predator on campus. He also is the guy who blew the whistle on some of Curtis Blackwell's recruits who were involved in the sexual assault that got them kicked out of school. I mean, what a complete, just sordid mess this entire thing was. And now I go back to that email that we received a week ago here on the show. And because here's the juncture we're at, Aaron. These things are minor NCAA violations. Now, lining up jobs for recruits is not, okay? But, how many coaches can make contact off campus and stuff? That's not going to do anything other than perhaps get you fired with cause and cause you a bonus. But it's, you're not going to lose 10 scholarships or a bowl ban over something like that. So all of the other potential things that Mark Dantonio could be lying about, though, are not frivolous. And they're all really bad. And for the life of me, why didn't they just cut Curtis Blackwell $250,000, a few $100,000, out of that massive salary pool that Mel Tucker has for assistants that he's not using, he's just hiring his assistants at Colorado and the guys that were already at Michigan State. All right, how about you take a $500,000 out of that salary pool and you cut a check to Curtis Blackwell, you make this entire thing go away. But now, Aaron, Pandora's box is opened now, and we're going to see how far down the rabbit hole goes now that we've got Mark Dantonio on the record lying under oath.
Yeah, so I think there are a few possibilities here as far as the answer to your question goes. Why didn't they just try to settle this long before it got to this point? So there's a few possibilities. One, Mark Dantonio is a compulsive liar. When you put stuff together with the frivolous stuff like the Devin Bush stomping whatever the incident was from a few years ago.
It ended with Devin Bush stomping on the logo, which I wasn't a big fan of, frankly.
But you're lying about that, things of that nature. Lying, the perjuring thing. You're just a compulsive liar. That's one option. Option number two, he's just a really, 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 really poopy person, and I think that's probably has tentacles into any of these options at all. This is just who he is. Or number three, which I think is the most likely option, he has been allowed to function and thrive.
Smugness.
And thrive in an environment where whatever he likes to do, he can do it. Whatever he wants to do, he can do it. However he wants to do it, he can do it. Whoever he wants to get, he can get. Despite the objections, say, of other assistant coaches. And I think that's probably the most likely. Because you look at other things with Michigan State, other things, Larry Nassar, ring a bell. This is endemic to that athletic department, apparently, just letting things run rampant for any period of time. And I think this is maybe finally starting to catch up with him. And so I do go back to that. I was thinking about this as I was reading the story that came out of the Detroit News. I was thinking about this through the entire thing from our question of the week last week, which is, maybe we should let the dust settle. And I gave I kind of poop. Well, there's a difference between Dantonio the man and Dantonio on the field, and still a great coach. Screw that noise. This guy's a fiend. It's starting to look like it, at the very least, more and more. And that's where we are. And that should, if this is going down the direction that we think it is, which he's lying about these frivolous things, what is he lying about that's more serious? Maybe his legacy should be marked by what I just said about him. And that's probably how it's going to be remembered for a lot of people. Anyway.
Yeah, my last thought on this, the smugness, I think, because it lines up with what we saw the last few years at Michigan State, right? The refusal to think outside the box, go get new blood in the program, and kind of just digging his heels all the more, right? That kind of has been his crotchety, get off my lawn. We have the Lord's favor MO, and this idea that, this guy's beneath me. This whole thing is stupid. And, why wasn't Curtis Blackwell dumb enough to know we needed him to be the scapegoat around here? Okay. He brought several of those players into the program. He was responsible for them. You've seen a mob movie or two. You bring the informant or you bring the bad guy into the family. When they take him out, Miller's Crossing style, and get rid of him, you go too, right? Because you were kind of his sponsor, his patron. And why wasn't Curtis Blackwell? Didn't he understand that those are the rules of the game? You brought these bad seeds into the program, not Austin Robertson, but several of the others. You brought them in. Your job's to take the fall guy here. And Curtis Blackwell decided he wasn't going to play by the clubhouse lawyer rules. And Mark Dantonio, I think, was just kind of smugly still playing by them. The problem is he did them on camera and under oath.
That's a problem, to say the least. And Mark Dantonio better have some pretty good lawyers. Again, that quote from the story that I don't know how he got into this photograph. I mean, I don't know how you come back from. You said it on camera. I don't know how you come back from that. I'm sure his lawyers, if there's a way, they'll figure it out probably. But good freaking gravy. This was already going down a very bad path. And then you thought last week when Mars, recused himself or withdrew from Curtis Blackwell's case, you thought, well, maybe this was a little bit more of full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Now it's going right back down.
No, it's gone Chernobyl.
So yeah. All right, story number 2 in the Big Five. We've talked about this just in passing a little bit. The Big Ten had a working proposal about transfers, allowing student athletes to transfer once to any school without sitting out a year for any reason whatsoever. I believe that's the way it went. Now the NCAA, it looks like, is looking into something similar regarding this. This is something that should have been done 10 years ago, 5 years ago, what have you. And when you look at situations, especially what just happened with Colorado, brought in a nice recruiting class, Mel Tucker is now bolting. This is another reason why retooling the way transfers are done is way past time. And I think this proposal, by and large, I think this is probably a step in the right direction at the very least. I would need to see what it actually looks like in its final form. I think for situations like with Mel Tucker or anything that there's 2 or 3 of those every single year where coach bolts. I think that should not be. I don't think that should be included in that one time for any reason proposal. I think that should just be a blanket. You know what? If your coach leaves before your freshman year, you should be able to re-sign somewhere else. But then you're also in the position where these schools who have signed these classes, they're just going to be completely decimated, and they're done. They're basically done before the season even starts. So what are your thoughts on these proposed measures?
Well, I think it's a delicate balance because on one hand, you're asking young men and women when they're 16, 17 years old to make a decision about what the next 4 to 5 years of their life is going to be like. And the amount of growing up you do between 16 and 21, 17 and 21 is incalculable. So there's going to be a hefty margin for error there. You know what I'm saying? That's number one. But number two, particularly, and I really don't want to get, Mark Dantonio crotchety, but I'm going to get a little, old man yells at cloud. We are dealing with probably the softest American generation of all time. And what I mean by that is the yours and the generation behind yours. It's not really been asked of you to overcome a lot of adversity. It's just not. And first time coach yells at me, my high school coach just told me what a great snowflake I was. First time coach yells at me and tells me I'm the lowest form of life, I'm out of here. So it's a delicate balance in that it's not fair, I think, to ask 16 and 17-year-olds that you have to be tethered for the next 4 to 5 years, potentially, to a decision that you made when you were still a kid, but your adult coach can go anytime he wants. I don't think that's fair. However, as a parent of 3 kids, and the oldest is 19 now, I'm a little concerned, though, that we then tell them at the same time, anytime you want to go, because for any reason, sometimes you have to be put in a position where you have to overcome adversity. Okay. That's why I like this rule the way it's structured. I think it's a happy medium where you answer the core moral challenge. I'm not a big fan of, uneven scales and weights and measures. I think those are, an injustice. So again, why is a young man tethered to a decision that an adult man is not? I don't think that's fair. It answers that, but it doesn't put so much power in the hands of young people that are still learning how to make adult level decisions that you can, drown as well. And that's why I like the one-time mulligan, the one-time freebie. No penalty anywhere you want to go at any point in time. No, don't need a waiver for any other reason. You made a mistake. You just want out. You want to start over. You're not playing. There's a family situation. I like the one-time mulligan. I think that strikes a very delicate balance between letting young people overcome decisions that ended up, not being what they thought they were going to be when they were still, in high school and often minors, but then not putting so much on their plate that because here's the thing, there's hundreds of players right now in the transfer portal that don't have a home. And the way the transfer portal works is if you can go in there anytime you want, but it's a little bit like the Hotel California. You can check in anytime you like, but you can't ever leave. Okay. You can go in anytime you want and without telling the school you're at, but they are only obligated to honor your scholarship to the end of that term or semester, depending on, the institution. And then after that, if you remain and you don't have a place to go, you're on your own. Okay. So I like the delicate balance that's struck here. I think it will actually take effect because you have the ACCs now saying they want to do it. The NCAA study committee on transfers said a couple days ago they were going to recommend this for the 2020-2021 school year. So I like the delicate balance that's struck here. And then one final point, you can already do this in virtually every sport other than football and men's basketball. So that again goes to, I don't like the unequal weights, measures, standards. If I can do it in softball, baseball, why can't I do it in other sports? So, that's the other thing I like about this. We get rid of those stupid waivers too. Just what is the standard? Have one standard, and then it's up to me to meet it.
Yeah, that's well said. And, as far as you provided the example of somebody who gets yelled at for the first time. And I think maybe we should, just so we're not accused of maybe straw manning here a little bit. I think what that actually looks like is a lot of these major schools, they're going to be recruiting 3, 4, 5-star guys who were the best of the best players in their high schools, and they've been told that they're the best, and now they come in. So it's not like these coaches and they've never been around being yelled at all this time. It's just a lot of times when you're a young person and you're used to being told that you're the best for 3 or 4 years when you're really, really young, and then you get popped in the face. That's probably, so it's not like they've never been yelled at before. That's not what I don't think you're saying at all. But
it is in some cases. I've seen it.
Really,
it is in some
even
cases.
For football,
yeah,
football
in some
players.
cases, it is this idea that I've never really been challenged on this level. What a lot of coaches will say nowadays. But you're right about the straw man overall. But in some cases, yeah, I do think it's an issue. A lot of coaches are saying nowadays they have to unrecruit. That there's the recruiting process, and then there's the unrecruiting process. Meaning there's the recruiting process to get them here. And then there's the unrecruiting process about the level of commitment and hard work it's going to take for them to deliver on the promise that and potential that was discussed during the recruiting process. But again, I like the tension.
Sure.
Like I like the fact that a coach has to re-recruit his own roster rather than just taking guys for granted. Because, if part of the reason that guy's not reached his potential, it's not, if we're going to do strawman, let's go the other way. It's not always that he's just some snowflake who can't hack it. You maybe haven't spent the time, cracking that kid's code of how to develop him. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So the more competition, the better. If I can go anywhere I want, anytime I want, one time with no penalty, if you want me, you essentially have to re-recruit me every year that I'm here. And I don't think that's a terrible. These coaches are making millions of dollars. They don't need to be treated like snowflakes either. A little extra competition ain't gonna make it that much harder, the job. On the other hand, I don't want to put a young man in a situation where I bolt at the first sign of adversity that I've never really faced, and then I don't have a place to go when the music stops playing. I have no chair to sit in. Yeah. Because there's hundreds of those players right now in the transfer portal in football and men's basketball that have nowhere to go right now.
Yeah. And one final word on this. I think we're both in agreement. This is the spirit of this, the way it is right now, is absolutely great because one-time mulligan, in the business world, you're not going to be able to bounce around between successful companies over and over and over again. You're going to, the resume that you're developing, your potential suitors are going to see, what the heck are you doing here? You can't hold the job down. So again, it's a one-time mulligan. That's good. But at the same time, it's a dose of the real world that once you're committed somewhere that you say for the second time you're actually committed, you better be committed. Let's move on to Maryland. They have now won 9 games in a row in the Big Ten. They have a 2-game lead over Penn State in the Big Ten standings for first place with 5 games remaining. It certainly appears now that they are inevitable. And it looked like with about maybe, I think it was less than 2 minutes left on Saturday when they were playing Michigan State. And I had Michigan State -6.5. That's neither here nor there. It looked like maybe this thing was going to get interesting going down to the wire, had a possibility to get interesting. And I think they rattled off 13 unanswered points or something like that against Michigan State in East Lansing to pull out the win on the road. They did this a couple of weeks ago in Indiana when they were on the ropes. I believe it was at Indiana when they were on the ropes.
Just stole that game.
This is becoming a pattern for Maryland, and we talked about, I believe it was last week. This is the time of the year where you really start to see some teams really mesh together and gel well. And Maryland strikes me as that sort of team at this point, Steve.
I agree with you. I think it's inevitable that they're, they keep that guy healthy right there, Jalen Smith. As long as he's healthy, they're going to win it. And we're going to talk about Penn State here in a second, but they got a big boost with Penn State losing last night at home to Illinois and cooling off who had been the league's hottest team. And now it's the Terps. And you can beat Tom Izzo in East Lansing. It's not easy, but how you almost never do it is what you just described, where you treat that as your home court. You put the gas to the pedal to the metal and close out the game in grand style, just out toughing, out executing Michigan State on their home floor. That's not typically how you beat them. And that's what they did. That looked like championship basketball. Maryland's not won the Big Ten basketball championship since they came into this league. They've been really good. I think they've averaged about 11 or 12 conference wins a year since Mark Turgeon brought them here. And here's the thing too, I still don't think they're quite the team we thought they were going to be in the preseason. There's still several guys in this team that aren't shooting the ball that well.
Yep.
They still, most nights, aren't sure who the third scoring option is going to be. So, I think that bodes well for them going into March, that they're not going to face, if you go to KenPom and look at the defensive efficiency numbers in this conference, I think Michigan, I saw that my team is, this morning, we're like 9th in the Big Ten in defensive efficiency, according to KenPom. We're 24th in the country, Aaron. 24th in the country. We're like 9th or 10th in the Big Ten. So maybe that's the reason they can't find the consistent third scoring option is, the defenses in this league are tough, and you're not going to see a lot of defense like that when you get to March Madness. Yeah,
that's one thing. And this is, I'm not knocking that at all. I'm just on any level. I'm just thinking at this point, I don't care who you are. I don't care what analytics you use. You can throw all of those out. If you can, especially in this league, beat another team in their house at their game when it really matters the most, as you just articulated, there's just, I don't think analytics can explain that.
Yep. Sometimes it's just a statement.
That's just a statement. Yeah. There's just the it factor of whatever that team has and whatever the makeup of that team is and the culture of that team. Sometimes it's just that. And I think Maryland right now, you've got to be excited if you're a Terps fan.
No doubt. I think they're going to win their first Big Ten regular season championship.
Yep. Let's move on to the aforementioned Penn State Nittany Lions. They're also very, very hot right now. Now, they did lose at home to the Fighting Illini of Illinois last night, as we're taping this on Wednesday afternoon this week. Previous to that, I believe they'd won 7 or 8 in a row.
8 in a row.
Yep. So Penn State, they did lose last night to the Fighting Illini at home. They were without one of their best players, Myron Jones. He had an illness, so it's nothing academic or team misbehavior related. So they were without him, but it was a gutsy effort for sure from Illinois. But Penn State this year, they've been really feisty. They've been really pesky the last few seasons. Especially, they just kind of came out of nowhere this season, at least for me anyway, and they have been playing just a really solid brand of basketball, getting big shots when they need to, and of course their defense has really stepped it up too, Steve. And what do you attribute this the most to?
Well, I thought they were really going to miss Rasheer Bolton when he transferred to Iowa State. And you mentioned Myron Jones, Miles Powell, those guys have really stepped up, and they haven't really missed him at all. They've turned Lamar Stevens into kind of a point forward, and he's an impossible matchup because he's still not a great perimeter shooter. He's not terrible, but he's not great. But because he has such a good handle, and he's unselfish, he'll share the basketball. You now have to respect him as if he is a really good perimeter shooter, which allows him a lot more space now when you overcommit to that, when you overextend your defense to break you down off the dribble and where he shines. He's got kind of what they call nowadays an old man's game. He's got that in-between game. He's just a maestro from 12 to 15, 16 feet from the basket. And I think he's the toughest matchup in the entire league. With all due respect to Luca Garza, you could argue he's the best player in the league, and we'll have that conversation a little bit later on. But in terms of matchup, because of Lamar Stevens, his size, Garza needs someone to get him the ball. Luca Garza, you just inbound, or Lamar Stevens, you just inbounds the ball. He brings it up. Yeah. He runs the offense. So there is no singular possession that you can take Lamar Stevens out of the game against Penn State. And I think that's what has made them a difficult matchup since really since the start of the year. But it's also why they got so hot. What they ran into last night is Ayo Dosunmu for Illinois. He's not quite as tall and big as Lamar Stevens, but he's a pure NBA combo guard, and his the size and quickness he brings to the table is at an elite level. Now, he had that knee buckle at the end against Michigan State, and they did an MRI. There was a fear that maybe he'd be gone for the year. He only missed one game, and then last night he scored more than 1/3 of Illinois' total points in 37 minutes.
Yep.
It was superhuman kind of an effort carrying them to victory. But still, this is going to be the best Penn State basketball season. I mean, I can't remember when, 20 years. I mean, I don't remember a time when Penn State was this good at basketball. It's probably mid to late 90s was the last time they were this good. And they had some good teams when Taylor Battle was there several years ago, but their schedule was so weak they couldn't make the tournament. I don't think Pat Chambers has made the NCAA tournament since being at Penn State. They're going to make it this year.
Yep, Penn State number 13 in KenPom, and you've been rehashing this statistic, both I think on the Bigger Ten Twitter feed and on Michigan Podcast Twitter feed, that only one NCAA champion has won without being in the top 25 of both the offensive and defensive efficiency numbers, stats, and
that goes back to 2000. Yeah, that goes back to since 2002 when KenPom debuted, as you said. Only one team, that was UConn, the Shabazz Napier year. That's the only team that won the NCAA tournament that was in top 25 in both offensive and defensive efficiency.
And you wouldn't think Penn State would even be in that conversation, but they're just barely on the outside looking in. They're number 30 in adjusted offense and number 17 in adjusted defense. And so really, really exciting stuff for them this time of the year. Over in Penn State. We'll move on to baseball now. Thoughts of warm weather abound? Maybe not yet, but Michigan, a Big Ten team at all, but Michigan is ranked number 1 by Baseball America in college baseball. I mean, I don't follow college baseball a heck of a lot. Sometimes Iowa does well. Sometimes they're on BTN if I've got nothing going on, during the springtime. But it says a lot, actually. It says a lot when any Northern team, but a Big Ten team is ranked at all, honestly. And to be number 1, it's early in the season, but to be number 1, that's a pretty good sign.
Well, since Michigan went to back-to-back College World Series when they had Barry Larkin, Chris Sabo, Jim Abbott back in the mid-'80s, okay? I think we've had, Stony Brook, Ohio State, Indiana, each one time, and Kent State. Those 4 are the only 4 I want to say, if you not counting when Nebraska was still in the Big 12, okay? I think those are the only 4 Northeastern time zone teams that, although Indiana's technically still in the Central, but in our footprint,
sure. Yep.
Those are the only 4 teams in our footprint that I think made the College World Series from when Michigan had a great run in the mid-'80s until when Michigan returned last year. It's very difficult to do. A lot of these are partial scholarships, so you need guys that can afford to pay in-state tuition for the other half, and that's a lot cheaper for the best players in California, Texas, and in the Southeast if they stay in-state, obviously, right? Michigan made that great run last year to the finals of the College World Series. I haven't, really followed college baseball, but, with the Tigers sucking, and it's my favorite team, I got way into it. I even took my son Noah and I went over to Omaha for their opening game in the College World Series last year and had a great time. Michigan brought a lot back, although they missed several of their key pitchers from last year's team. We got drafted high in the majors, but a lot of the rest of those pieces were back. They've recruited very, very well. A couple of top 10 classes in a row. So they were ranked number 8 in the preseason poll. They opened up the season with how they ended last year, number one Vanderbilt, beat number one Vandy, followed that up by beating who a lot of people think is the best mid-major program in the country, Cal Poly, who also has a win over Vanderbilt, and then beat number 3 Arizona State as well. And that has Michigan for the first time in any poll in 42 years, but for the first time ever in Baseball America, ranked number 1 in the country. And I don't even remember the last time a Big Ten team was ranked, any Big Ten team was ranked number 1 in college baseball. And if I had to guess, I'm wondering if you'd have to go back to those mid-'80s Michigan teams, all those major leaguers. Hal Morris from the Cincinnati Reds was on those teams as well. So I don't know that we'll get into a lot of college baseball unless, again, we see one of our teams make a run to Omaha like we did last year. But when one of our teams gets ranked number 1 in a sport like that for the first time in maybe a generation, definitely worth noting.
So here's the deal. One final thing. It's February 19th. Talking about baseball is fine with me when one of my main activities this time of the year is looking up the temperature in Miami and looking up the temperature just a few hours south.
It's one of the reasons why I play a lot of Rory McIlroy golf this time of year, just to get a look at what it looks like to see green grass and leaves on trees in warm weather. Indeed. We'll come back, play our weekly game of Big Ten Would You Rather next.
Bigger Ten is brought to you by Michigan Podcast. If you like what you're hearing today and would like to support us, head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/Michigan Podcast, where if you live somewhere where sports wagering is illegal, you can find Steve's picks for various games. So far in basketball, college basketball this year, he's been on fire. That's patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. You can get his game day picks, which he posts almost every day now for just $5 a month. In the process, you can say thank you for creating this podcast on YouTube or via podcast, wherever you listen. Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast.
All right, Aaron, let's play it. Our weekly game of Big Ten Would You Rather. And this very first one is for you, brother. We briefly touched on it, but let's go into more detail. Would you rather start a college basketball team with Luca Garza or Lamar Stevens?
My goodness. Oh, depends on who else is on the team.
Well, that's why I said start.
Yeah, start.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go Homer here. You mentioned and you made a compelling case for Lamar Stevens. Luca Garza can't get his own shot like Lamar Stevens can. But what Luca Garza means to the mentality of the team so far, and we'll see more with Lamar Stevens, I'm sure. But the mentality of the team, the toughness that he brings, the leadership that he shows this team. I mean, the dude has stitches and freaking cuts and scars everywhere because of the hits and things that he's taken. And he's just such a high effort, high energy player. And he really, I think he is the rising tide in a lot of ways that lifts all boats. Which is, I mean, even on an off night for Luca Garza, the amount of effort and leadership that he gives, you really can't put a price tag on that. So that's the case that I would make for Luca Garza. But you make a really compelling case just from an X's and O, or Jimmy's and Joe's perspective about Lamar Stevens. But there is something priceless, I believe, about Luca Garza that you just can't, I don't see yet replicated with Lamar Stevens.
I don't think there's a wrong answer.
Yeah.
We'll
go next to this one. And I saw this before I saw your first submission for Would You Rather. So I'm pleading the fifth here, but I was like, I saw this first before I saw this, so I'm not changing. Robbie Hummel and Mike DeCourcy from Big Ten Network, they put together a kind of an all-star roster, a couple of all-star teams this weekend.
Those are two damn good basketball teams.
Those are really good teams. And so I'm going to ask you, and I've got a graphic up here for our YouTube audience with their teams. Would you rather have Robbie Hummel's team or Mike DeCourcy's team? Robbie's got Cassius Winston, Wieskamp, Livers, Stevens, and Oturu. DeCourcy has Cowan, Jones, DeSumo, Smith, and Garza, Jalen Smith from Maryland.
So I'm going to take Robbie Hummel's team.
Really?
But here's why. Well, first of all, I think Cassius Winston's a better distributor. I don't think he requires scoring to be, he's the Big Ten's all-time assist leader. I don't think he requires being a scorer to put his imprint on a game the way Anthony Cowan does. okay? But the main reason why is the bottom two guys on each team. Jalen Smith and Luca Garza, I don't think really complement each other very well. Like if you had switched Jalen Smith with Lamar Stevens, or even Jalen Smith with Daniel Arturo, I probably would have taken Mike DeCourcy's team. But Jalen Smith has a game very similar to Luca Garza's in that he can play back to the basket, but he's fine facing up as well. I think putting Jalen Smith in the game actually takes away space for Luca Garza to operate and vice versa. Whereas I think Lamar Stevens and Daniel Arturo complement each other much better because Stevens doesn't need to be in the lane. Isaiah Livers and Joe Wieskamp are true wing players. They don't need to be in there either and can both drive to the basket, creating their own shot, which makes Lamar Stevens, I mean, you want to talk about a devastating two-man game. I mean, Lamar Stevens taking ball screens from a Daniel Arturo or a Luca Garza if you flip-flopped him, and his ability to attack off the bounce like a point guard. I just think the way that you can space the floor with Robbie Hummel's team is better than the way you can space the floor with Mike DeCourcy's team. And I think Cassius Winston shares the ball better in that scenario than Anthony Cowan does.
That's well said.
All right, this one is for you. Would you rather be, these are considered the two coaches in our league on the hot seat right now, however warm it is. Would you rather be Richard Pitino at Minnesota or Archie Miller at Indiana when it comes to job security?
Richard Pitino, hands down. I don't really know what the expectations are for Minnesota basketball. I do know that the expectations for Indiana basketball are sky high. Tom Crean, I mean,
it's the all-time greatest basketball program in our league.
Of course. Yeah. And so if you don't perform at the highest levels within 3 or 4 years, you're probably going to be coaching at Georgia in a few years, like Tom Crean is right now. And
remember, Tom Crean got fired for missing the tournament twice in 4 years.
Yeah.
Archie Miller's in his third year, hasn't made it yet, and he's a bubble team right now.
Yeah. So again, Minnesota is not going to put up with not making the tournament on perennially, but at the same time, I don't think the expectations there are nearly as high. I think if they make it in once every other year, maybe throw in an off year here or there, I think that's probably going to be good enough for Richard Pitino to keep his job. It is interesting though when I feel like maybe Minnesota and to some degree Indiana are kind of like this year's Illinois team, where it's like on paper they should be really, really good, and it seems like Minnesota, it's the same thing every year as well, where they look like they have a really good roster and they play pretty competitively, but just not living up to expectations like Illinois, unlike this year, has had for perennially for a number of years. So I would definitely be Richard Pitino, just because I don't think the expectations are quite so sky high. Football related question: would you rather your team, generally speaking, have a quiet or active offseason?
Well, until the transfer portal, this was a no-brainer. No news is Gary news. Yep. From about the first Wednesday in February until the start of spring ball. And then you really want it to go quiet from the spring game until fall practice starts, right? Because if you're in the news, it's bad. I would still rather have a quiet one, but because the transfer portal works both ways. You can both give the transfer portal, give it, then it take it away. So you know what? I'd still rather have a quiet one because even though you can still get some decent players in the transfer portal, most of the time you would be making news in the offseason. Would be for things that are not helpful to your cause
driving
come the fall.
Or players driving their scooter in a non-scooter zone, things like that.
Yeah. Dating Paula over in Iowa City. Yeah. She's got a pretty full dance card every offseason over there, apparently.
It's true.
All right, we'll get back. We'll come back and we'll get to our Twitter question of the week, or Twitter poll of the week, I should say, as well as our question of the week. I'll get it right here in a moment.
Bigger 10 is also brought to you by Wolverine Digest from Sports Illustrated. You can find that at wolverinedigest.com. For all of you Michigan fans, you can find a daily rundown of all the hottest topics from basketball and football to recruiting and much, much more. That's wolverinedigest.com, a part of Sports Illustrated.
This week's Twitter poll, we asked the audience, will Maryland win its first Big Ten basketball championship this season? Almost 70% of you said yes, 68.8. 31.2% of you said no. We're on the record thinking, yeah, that it's inevitable now. Unless something like a Jalen Smith or Anthony Cowan goes down, they're going to be at least a share of the Big Ten championship. Which brings us to the question of the week this week from Mel Pierce. Why do I always feel like I wasted my time when I watch this? Mel, stop watching it then. Aaron, I think you don't want somebody to be wasting their time on your behalf, do you?
See, here's the thing, Mel. You did watch it, though, which is all I care about. Because, that check from YouTube, it's still cleared. Small though it may be, it's still cleared, and you helped contribute to last week's episode, which was by far our most successful episode of Bigger 10 here on YouTube. Thank you very much.
Who's the bigger fool? The fool or the fool who wasted his time watching him, right?
Exactly.
All right, so we got scoreboard on you, Mel. But seriously, if it's bothering you that badly, brother, stop watching. I mean, go do something else. Pick up a hobby,
Mel just cares very loudly at us.
Cares very loudly. And we don't care at all about you, Mel. Thanks. That'll do it for this week's episode. We will be back at it again next week right here on Bigger 10.